something happening here. But what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that?
Howdy, and welcome to Occupy TV. I'm David Ciarlupe. With me is Michelle Schacht from all over the place, currently on her Rockupy tour, also from Occupy LA. And thank you for coming and joining us today, Michelle.
It's my pleasure seeing how the media crew at Occupy Eugene rolls. That's great. Thanks a lot, David.
All right, all right. Well, that's wonderful. So yeah, and thank you for that. Was a wonderful show you put on last night. You have an amazing way of interacting with your audience.
The People's Republic of Eugene. You can't go wrong here, man. It's like I was in Madison last March. Same thing. You know it when you feel it. There's a community spirit. That thing we try to create in the General Assemblies of a collective consciousness. It's like giving over your individual ego to something greater than ourselves. Oh, yeah. And I felt it in the room last night. And I crowd surf on it, you know. It's like I just throw myself on top of it and ride the wave. It's wonderful.
Well, I'm glad we had it there for you. Yeah, yeah. Well, let's start where you came from, Occupy LA, and then maybe get into Rockupy and like I said, I want to talk a little bit about Shocked and Awed, which I thought was just wonderful as soon as I heard about it.
Okay.
But you are, aside from being Michelle Schacht, a representative of Occupy LA, the first representative I've had a chance to sit down and talk with. So
they are very persnickety about anyone claiming to be a representative of Occupy LA. I am Michelle, 99, and I'm here to represent myself, but I am a proud member of the General Assembly of Occupy LA, and I was there from the first night. I didn't pitch a tent, but I helped people pitch tents, and I came to the General Assembly every night. I was so compelled by the vision that unfolded right in front of my eyes. So I have just watched this movement take shape and contributed to the form that it has taken by my active participation. And I feel so blessed because when I first saw it evolving, I recognized, I think I've got the inside scoop. It's not a political movement. It's a spiritual movement.
Yes. I've had a lot of people recognize that and had opportunities to discuss that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard such a diversity of opinions, but the point is I've heard the opinions because we have found a nonviolent way of holding discourse that is thrilling to me, that I haven't heard or felt or seen in a long, long time. And once you catch that glimpse, once you catch that vision, it's like you're sated. You know now what you need to do to contribute to that dialogue going forward, and that's what leads to, this Rockupy tour that I'm on. But more importantly, what I have been most privileged by is that most of the occupiers don't know anything about Michelle Schacht. That's like a secret hidden identity. And I represent myself there as Michelle 99. That's all I claim to be, Michelle 99. And it's wonderful because I get to actively engage and caucus and participate in committees. And poor Tom Morello, I don't know if you know that band Rage Against the Machine, but every time he shows up, it's like cameras in his face and interview requests and all that. And I'm like, God bless you, Tom. Keep on rocking. But I get to caucus with my people, and I love the stealth approach. I really do.
You get to actually get work done, because you're not the buzz isn't overriding what you have to say.
Yeah, it's not depending on me being famous to be effective, and I dig it. I like being nobody. I'm just part of the 99%.
Wonderful. I don't remember when did you occupy in LA?
October 1st.
October 1st. Okay.
There was a core group that started in late September at Pershing Square, and so they actually, you know, in that transparent process, you can go back and you can watch the meetings that were taking place to make the decisions about where the encampment was going to be established, when the encampment was going to be established. And there was a lot of concern. We wanted to build on the momentum of Occupy Wall Street, but we knew that October 1st was a premature launch. We didn't have the infrastructure in place, so we were constantly catching up with ourselves from the first day. As for the decision to occupy City Hall Park right in front of City Hall, there was some pros and cons back and forth about that, but I feel very strongly that they made the wise decision. It was the right place at the right time.
It seemed like Occupy LA was one of the, I guess, you had more cooperation, I guess. You know, you weren't, the LAPD and such were accommodating to some measure. You know, like you had City Hall, you know, surrounded, I guess, and they didn't make those immediate moves to kick you out, you know, like was going on in Chicago and such, where, you know.
I wouldn't give them that much credit, because when the order came, and I believe from Homeland Security, to shut it down, they came down hard like stormtroopers. But let's review. There was 3 factors that made it somewhat unique. Is that the City Council had members who actively support, endorse, and share our values. They knew what we were up to. Second, the City of LA is broke. Not only could they not really afford to evict or police us properly, but more importantly, the issues that we were addressing that led to the City of LA being broke, we were allies in that respect. And then the third thing I would say is that we have a mayor who represents a very large Latino population. And a lot of the consequences of this economic irresponsibility has come down hardest and heaviest, not only on the legal, how do you say it, the documented Latino population, but the non-priority status, undocumented immigrant population as well. So I don't know if you remember, but when they launched that invasion into the sovereign nation of Iraq, we came out strong. We came out swinging. Maybe 10,000 people showed up marching on the streets. Less than 6 months later, on the issue of immigration reform, they pulled off what they called the Million Mexican March. 1 million people came out on the streets. And so effectively, just like the May 1st general strike we're hoping to achieve, they came out, showed their numbers, and then disappeared. Never heard from them, never saw them again. So they showed the strength in numbers, but they didn't have to keep putting it in front of people's faces, but the politicians knew that they were there and they were paying attention. And, you know, as a side note, I say, yeah, that's what we're hoping with the May 1st general strike, is to show our numbers. But those are 3 of the factors, among many, that Occupy LA had going for it. We also have the medical marijuana reform issue, so that some of the more outrageous behaviors taking place at our encampment, and some of the criticism that we've heard is that we didn't really respect the commons, that we let things get a little too anarchic. But insofar as you know, we have not only a large homeless population, but Skid Row is less than 10 blocks from the encampment. So we were embracing that fact. We were saying that they're part of the 99% as well. And the police had, I guess since their Safer Cities initiative in the 90s, they had already been policing downtown with what they called the box. And they just kept pushing the homeless population into this square area, which, as I say, was not too far from our encampment. So,
did they end up pushing them into your encampment as a result?
In my opinion, it was a beautiful dance we were doing with the LAPD. It's like, you know, no, I'm not going to go off on that tangent. But yeah, it was like a Nicola dance. And so they were dancing with us, we were dancing with them. And I think the LAPD pride themselves on being streetwise. They, you know, they've paid attention. They're savvy. They know their community.
And when I was saying that, I don't know if I said that they treated you well. I don't think I said that, but like here in Eugene, we had lots of cooperation from the EPD and the city council up to a point, and you could see that when that point came, it was predetermined. Almost, I sometimes thought it was determined weeks in advance, but during that period of time before the decision was made, we were handled quite well. Kid gloves, not quite, but something like that.
Yeah.
And as I was looking at LA, the Occupy LA thing, I was thinking it's probably the same thing. If you don't have to pick a fight, don't pick a fight. And I think that might have been the approach until you have to pick a fight. And
the cynics among us might suggest that it's more along the philosophy of give them enough rope to hang themselves.
Yeah. The only reason I don't know if I agree with that is because then you never know for sure if they're going to hang themselves. And I think that law enforcement in this day and age, nothing's left to chance.
It did feel very orchestrated. Everything about it has felt like we're just scripted into a reality show.
Yeah, that was my feeling. Yeah. So now you were saying you feel like really Occupy is maybe the first act, and I don't even know if the second act will be called Occupy. I suspect it won't, but that when it really moves to that next level, it's going to require the embrace of the issue of the immigrant in America.
That's my vision for the movement, was early on when I saw the labor unions and I saw people like from the janitors unions coming, checking out the encampment, seeing the dialogue. There was very little to no Spanish translations taking place. So I was standing back, listening as a translator was interpreting for some union folks the larger dialogue that was taking place between, I referenced it last night where they said, let's go march and stand in solidarity with these striking workers. And the other side was saying, no, bring them here. Let's make a stand here together. Right. And that was just one of many partisan, polarizing divides that took place, which I welcome. I like having that dialogue. But I could see the perplexity in I don't speak Spanish, but I could hear as the translator was explaining to these unionists what was being discussed, and them kind of shaking their heads, because within the union movement, especially in LA, I mean, it's a very large Latino majority.
Oh, yeah.
They have so little civil rights, so few economic rights outside. So there is power in a union. So my vision for Occupy LA, even at that early stage of the encampment, was a memory of the Million Mexican March. That when we hit critical mass, a lot of the mass is going to be from the Latino community. I can't honestly say that everyone at Occupy shares that vision. It's my personal vision, but it really excited me to the point where when the eviction came, November 30th, was exactly 2 months into the occupation, I put more of my energy into the fight against foreclosures, which maybe you know the statistics, is 80% more likely to affect the Latino communities. They were,
I didn't know that.
In predatory lending practices, they were targeted first and foremost. And also African American communities, we're saying it's the largest transfer of wealth since Reconstruction, which basically tells you one thing: it's reverse redlining. Predatory lending is going into vulnerable communities of color and saying, come here, we've got a deal you can't refuse.
Yeah.
And whacking you. So that's why, partly why I put my focus into foreclosure, but my vision was always of that critical mass. And we've got a population that has been demanding for over 20 years, legalize LA, legalize. this citizenry, you know, it's easy to kind of fall into slogans. We didn't cross the border crossed us.
Yeah.
But it's down to human rights. I did a Amnesty International conference last month, and Amnesty International has adopted immigrant rights or human rights as their theme for this year. So this is the year.
This is the year it happens. Yeah. So the million person march, is that what you're saying? What was it?
I don't know what it was. Yeah, million Mexican
But I mean,
march.
they just, because one of the things about Occupy that people always say is that you come out and you do your anti-Iraq war thing, you know, where we had, I think one day just before the launch of the war, we had millions of people all over the earth protesting that we were about to go to this unnecessary war. And then the next day, the protest was done, and everybody was back in their homes. And it didn't have any lasting power because you weren't forcing the powers that be to confront that on a daily basis. And that's why the occupation was so important. That's why the actual physical occupations are so important, because we were there one day, and then the next day, and then the next day, and we were learning how to stay there while we were doing that. And so that's what I was wondering. You were talking about that one day. That was Prop 84. Was that what it was that they were going against?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. My memory of it isn't great.
Yeah.
But the impression of it was that it was just to show up in numbers. It may have been Prop 84.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm a little ignorant on that.
Well, that was the anti-immigrant proposition in
California? Okay,
let's
go with that.
During the last decade. And I remember I was impressed by the numbers that did show up and the impact it had, which happened right after the Iraq War.
Okay.
Didn't have an impact. And so, but the thing was, this was an electoral thing, where the people were voting yes or no. Will we do this heinous immigrant bashing law?
Yeah.
And what we're protesting right now is something we can't vote on. As a matter of fact, we're protesting the fact that we can't vote.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but look
Yeah.
at it this way. Whether we showed up in smaller numbers protesting Iraq, or whether we showed up in massive numbers protesting Prop 84, they still march on and do legislatively what they will according to the influence peddlers' whims. So the importance of the occupation cannot be disputed, and I would never want to disband Occupy as a movement because it had its chance and it proved ineffective. No, it was so effective that I just want to see Occupy 2.0. I want my encampment back. I want my peoples.
Yeah. You weren't going off in any tangent.
All right.
That was exactly where we need to be going. Yeah. No. Just fine. So you went into foreclosures. You did the song Blanca Cardenas to highlight that, and perhaps her case brings those two issues together: the issue of the immigrant rights and the issue of the Wall Street
swindle
putting the screws to us. Yeah.
How is it possible that you can't get a visa or a green card, but you can get a mortgage?
I wondered about that. Yeah.
Some Ponzi schemes are better than others. Foreclosure, it brings a light onto not only the economic issues of the Occupy Wall Street movement and the legislative issues, but also the judicial issues. It's like a perfect storm. And Blanca Cardenas, I mean, if people just stopped and paused on the one implication of an investor being able to call the LAPD and have you arrested for trespassing in your own house.
I wonder if you would tell the story.
Blanca was a non-priority status immigrant. She's married to a U.S. citizen. She has a 14-year-old son who's a U.S. citizen, 17-month-old, still breastfeeding little girl. So she's a euphemism. Even though she's a human being, She is a euphemism in our broken political system. She's non-priority status.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like our don't ask, don't tell policy. We can't fix the situation, but if she steers clear, we won't mess with her.
Right.
So she bought a house, I'm going to say around 2003. And in 2008, she fell behind 1 month. And that was her cue to go to Bank of America, who had bought her loan from Countrywide, and apply for a loan modification. Bank of America, we know this narrative very well by now, told her, sure, we'll work with you. It's going to take a little time.
Right.
And behind her back starts the dual tracking process.
It's going to take a little time for us to get all the paperwork to evict you. So go
And
ahead.
collect the
Yeah.
insurance on.
Yeah.
So they get the foreclosure process going, sell the house at auction. None of this is known to Blanca Cardenas. When finally the truth is revealed, she immediately, as homeowners do, file for bankruptcy protection. And while under bankruptcy protection, the investor who had bought her house at auction got very impatient with the whole judicial process. Shows up outside of her house, basically stalking her, and calls the LAPD. And Blanca makes a stand, and she likely knows the consequences of taking the stand that she took.
Right.
She's holding not only the mortgage that she has, but the bankruptcy protection papers protecting her, while the investor is standing outside on the sidewalk in front of her house showing the LAPD papers that he bought illegally at an auction her home. And the LAPD, who have no training, no jurisdiction, no experience even in these kinds of fraud cases, are having to make a judgment call right there on the spot. They couldn't get a hold of a lead officer for advice, so they had to stand down. Somebody got arrested, and it wasn't the investor. In her own house, Blanca Cardenas was arrested for trespassing. $100 bail. They didn't release her. They turned her over to ICE, Immigration, Customs, which means that in their predatory lending practices, they clearly know who is and is not non-priority status immigrants. So they are able now to target the most vulnerable citizens. I'm going to call her a citizen, whether she's documented or not. And they are able to commit egregious fraud and swindle. And that's going to get the community fired up. It's like, we know where you live because we sold you the house.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So the implications of it are enormous. We went to city council. We tried telling Blanca Cardenas' story to city council, but they only give you a minute.
Right.
We went to the police commissioner board. We tried to explain to them the implications of putting their officers in the line of fire over something that's basically the sheriff's jurisdiction. They couldn't connect the dots fast enough, and Blanca was fast-tracked by ICE. So we went downtown to the detention center, and in the story that I tell, I explain how the prisoners in the detention center have adopted this technique of blacking out the bottom half of their windows of their prison cells. And so if you're standing outside the detention center, what you see as they wave their hand over the top half is like these twinkling lights. It's a metaphor for something cosmic. I can't even begin to describe. As you're down there on the street protesting, the prisoners see someone, anyone, lifting a voice, and they don't even know the details of what it is, but they're up there waving those lights saying, yes,
We're here.
we are the unseen, we are the silent. And then we were too late. We saw this unmarked white bus rolling away from the detention center, and on that bus was Blanca Cardenas. And about 2-3 hours later, while we were still out there holding vigil, a prepaid call came from Tijuana, and it was Blanca.
She was
in Mexico.
Yeah. It's a shame. Yeah, and that's why we do. That's why we do what we do when we occupy. I mean, for that reason and so many others. We still have a half hour, and I'd like to maybe hit on some other things. I want to talk about your activism, and to some degree we've already talked about it, and your philosophy of why we are here, and what in this point we are in our society right now. But I want to get back to the Shocked and Awed tour.
Okay.
Because that was that was a finger, that was thumb in your nose, sticking up your finger right at the power elite,
Go ahead and describe it. I want to know it from your point of view.
Yeah. Well, just my impression, was here we have we're in a steadily clamped down police state these days, and then we go and attack this other country. Needlessly, a war of choice, which in The Hague, our leaders should have been held accountable for, but they weren't. It's a crime, yes. But most, like the Dixie Chicks, they made a very small gesture. I mean, I don't even remember what it was now. I think it was an offhand comment one of the members of the band said.
In England, about George Bush,
Yeah, and suddenly,
embarrassed that he was from Texas, like them.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, and suddenly their CDs are getting burned. They're getting death threats. It was a horrible time to be in opposition. And in the middle of all that, all of a sudden you rise up. Here we are. We invade Iraq with shock and awe. We are the preeminent military power in the world, and we are going to show you. Really, we're going to show you what it means to not have let us beat you 10 years before. Basically what it was, to W's daddy. Yeah, so we're going to shock and awe you to the Stone Age, and we're going to make sure nobody else says anything about it, you Dixie Chicks, etc. And then you rise up right in the middle of it and you say, shock and awe. Shocked and awed. Yeah, I am not afraid of you. And I'm going to rise up and make fun of you like nobody else can. And I just respected the heck out of that.
Thank you for that, but I'm going to give a lot of the credit to folks who came before me. Peter Bergman and his partner in collaboration, Mary Edith Burrell. Peter Bergman comes from the Fire Sign Theater tradition, so he joined me on that tour and hit him where it hurts, which is in the funny bone. He did brilliant little interstitial sketches between songs that I thought were so funny, so righteous, so right on. And what you need to know when you're living in a police state is there's no sense of humor allowed. It's forbidden. And so it's kind of a Nietzschean moment or a Kafkaesque moment where it's funny and no one's laughing. It's like that's how repressed things got.
Yeah.
And so at that point you really have to just throw it to the wind. It was the equivalent of career suicide, if there's such a thing. But the way I like to say this tour I'm doing, Rockupy now, Bruce Springsteen would give his left nut to have the freedom, the independence, the liberty that I am experiencing. I can say what I want to say, do what I want to do. Clearly, it's not a way to be popular. It's not a way to grow an audience. But I figured out a long time ago, my job is to follow my instincts. And my instincts say, be there for the one person who's maybe standing in their isolated community speaking out against injustice, and let them know that you cannot you can't arrest an idea.
Yes. And you can't declare war on an idea. Yeah. So that's beautiful. I mean, sure. The TV networks and cable and all that, they're gonna crown whoever they can sell the most CDs out of, or whatever market measurement they're going by these days. But that isn't going to make the world a better place.
And I say like this, David, more to the point, at least people knew who the Dixie Chicks were when they made their stand. By that point, I had made so many principled stands that I was so under the radar, and that's when you really feel vulnerable. It's like they can make threats. I did a similar thing. I was in South Africa, I guess it was it was in 2006, 2007. I don't know, all I said 3 were worst president ever. That's all I said. And I got swift boated. Remember swift boating?
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah.
I got these emails, a flood of emails from I don't know what organization was set up to, target outspoken critics of the Bush administration.
Uh-huh.
But it was a really good reminder that there's strength in numbers. So I'm really grateful for my Occupy comrades.
Yeah.
Maybe we're not all marching in lockstep on the same ideological point by point, but we know we got each other's back. I love it.
Do you guys down in LA adhere to the St. Paul's principles?
We have the principles of nonviolence and solidarity. I don't know them as St. Paul's principles.
Yeah. Oh, there was some principles that were developed around the Republican convention in '08, because that was really, I guess, in contemporary terms, when the police state really got out front and said, this is how it's going to be from now on. They were cracking heads. That's when they started penning people. I think that's when the idea of the free speech zone was introduced.
The free speech zone went back to '84. Yeah. We were in San Francisco at the DemCon there. They said, here, you have something to say, stay inside this pen. Although I will say in '08, they had it really down to a fine art with the chain link fence and go literally inside this pen to speak freely. Yeah.
That's always blown me away. I mean...
Give me Tiananmen Square!
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, do they have barbed wire on top of that, the free speech zone? I don't know. It would have finished the image at any rate. But people who were going to the Republican convention, they knew they were going into the teeth of the machine.
Yeah.
And they knew that they needed solidarity to make it happen. And so you had just talked about, you're moving in, you're not moving in lockstep, but we're moving in solidarity, and that's important. And the fact that you've taken these principled stands and taken the hits that came from it, and by now I imagine you can. Yeah.
What does not kill me makes me stronger.
That's right. And as a result, your strength can flow outward now.
And I receive strength, and that's really what I was feeling. That crowd surfing. Think about the image of throwing yourself onto the mercy of a crowd who lifts you and carries you on their shoulders and enables you to fight another day. I'm so grateful for the privilege of being Michelle Schacht and Rockupying. It's wonderful.
How I want to keep focused on the philosophy and all that, but to some degree, it's important. I want to, you talked about Rockupy is part of a long series of projects, I guess you got going on, tours. I mean, this is a part of a 5-year thing, just like Star Trek?
Yeah, Roadworks is the touring project. Indelible Women is the recording project that will come at the end of the Roadworks 5-year tour. So the first year of Roadworks was a theme of American Idol. I mentioned, not like the TV show, IDLE, and it was a celebration of the jobless recovery, because they had just announced the unemployment statistics. They had just announced, that profits were at an all-time high, employment was at an all-time low, and this was evidence of success. So we were celebrating the jobless recovery. And then in 2011, last year was the 25th anniversary of my bootleg debut, an album called The Texas Campfire Tapes. So this year's theme is Rockupy. Next year's theme is a celebration of the 20-some-odd year anniversary of Short, Sharp, Shocked, and that's the album I was referencing where the cop had me in the chokehold. And then the following year will be the launch of my new recording project, Indelible Women.
Okay. But in the meantime, you were Rockupying the nation, one city at a time. How many occupations have you come to so far?
It was amazing, because last year I said we launched Occupy LA in October. I had a tour in UK, Ireland in October. And it was like, maternity leave. It's like you've got this little baby and now you've got to go back to work. And I remembered saying to people in the encampment, please be here when I get back. But the amazing thing was, when I left to go on tour in England and Ireland, there were maybe 50, 60 occupations. By the time I came back, there were over 500. And I was watching them spring up under my feet. I went to Occupy Galway, Occupy, they call in Dublin, they call it Occupy Dame Street, because Dame Street is their Wall Street. Of course, Occupy London, Occupy Birmingham. I mean, occupations were literally just springing up under my feet. So by the time I came back to Occupy LA, I was like, oh, you're still here. And then I had to go out again in November for the leg of my southeastern U.S. tour. And that took me into Florida, so I got to meet the folks from Occupy Tampa. Make a note of that, because we're going to need that later this year.
Oh, yeah?
And where else? Occupy Austin. I got to stop by and say hey to the folks at Occupy Austin. Occupy Birmingham. They have a foreclosure committee that's been really helpful, because I have a friend who I found out is facing foreclosure herself, and she didn't know where to turn. And from everything I've learned about foreclosure, I'm like, don't leave. Stay
in your house.
Fight back.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's pretty daunting for someone who's never been engaged in activist struggles to say. And there was a gal from Occupy Birmingham who was at the Amnesty International conference. I said, can you please visit my friend? She lives right outside of Birmingham, Alabama. Go and see her. And I have a comrade now in Birmingham that can check on my friend. So what a great feeling that was, to have a family of occupiers.
Yeah, which is part of the benefit of occupying, of this movement existing as it does, is that we don't have to be the one person who does it all. We now have a web of people who didn't exist. This web of people that we have around us now 7 months ago, 6 months ago, didn't exist. And now we can turn to those people in times of need.
And, you know, for people who feel forgotten or maybe underappreciated, well, hey, the FBI would love to make a file on you. Join the movement.
Yeah.
You can have your own FBI file.
Yep, I was just writing about that, as a matter of fact. Yeah, my wife does the medical clinic here, and they first set up the medical clinic in the courtyard of the federal building. And the first week they were there, because they didn't get a permit, you know, they just we had a medical clinic in the camp when the camp was running, staffed by doctors and nurses, and people who had never gotten medical care, or, you know, had been sorely undersupplied of medical care throughout their life, were suddenly getting it and finding out, you know, you need to go to get this taken care of, you need to get that taken care of, and actually getting their needs met. So when the camp got shut down, they wanted to keep being able to do that. And so about a little bit over a month after the camp got shut down, they said, okay, well, let's just keep doing it. Let's take it out to the federal building. And the first week they were there, Homeland Security showed up. And you know, my wife Sue went over to talk to them and said, okay, you know, we're doing everything there. And she said, my name's Sue Sierra Lupe. And he said, oh, I know your name. You know, so, you know, to some degree, that's what they want. They want you to be afraid of having that file. But I say no.
No, it's a badge of honor.
Yeah.
If J. Edgar Hoover wants to go around wearing lingerie, I'm into with that. You know, come on, bring it on.
Yeah. And it means you're doing something. It means you got their attention because you're doing something, because you're making a good change, a positive change.
Very much so. Speaking of positive change, I know our time is running short, but Representative Clark Hansen from Michigan introduced legislation yesterday calling for a national 3-year moratorium on foreclosures. Just yesterday. So let this be, if your viewers haven't heard, an initiative for those who are jiggy with, you know, occupying the electoral system, occupying the vote, occupying the courts, occupying whatever it takes. That they need 2 things. They need co-signers, so representatives to co-sign onto the bill, of course, and for us to make a noise, for us to let them know that this is a step in the right direction, that the 99% say yes.
Yes. Yeah. And the 99% are leaning on their House of Representatives, their congressmen saying, you better say yes. Yeah. Which hopefully we can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we got 18 some odd minutes to go, so we're doing fine.
All right.
Yeah. Let's you talked about the jobless recovery and all that, and I don't know how political do you want to get in this conversation? How much in the weeds do you want to get?
Well, what's so great about it is I make no claims. I say I am the most sophisticated hillbilly you're ever going to meet. And so what's been really interesting to me is that people who got the memo, I never got the memo. And my people never got the memo. We talk about foreclosure as a crisis, and then in Berkeley the other night from Occupy Oakland, where they got the memo a long time ago, he's showing up saying, this is not a crisis, this is class war. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to convince my people, and a lot of my audience I identify with being of that. Last night, Jen from the Eugene skit player, she's saying, yeah, I knew these people were supportive, but it's like armchair occupiers, And that's a lot of what I identify with is how are people seeing these images in the media going to possibly be compelled to engage with a movement that looks so
rough
open.
and tumble?
Yeah, so rough and tumble, so
Okay.
open-ended, so chaotic. And I personally wouldn't have it any other way, but I think it's because I'm an artist, because I know that the creative process is very much like a movement. It's a work in progress, and I think people are far more comfortable being given assignments, like coming in, the hierarchy's already been established, like showing up for your job. But the movement is like being an artist. You have to create your job.
Yeah.
And if you don't create your job, no one will miss you. But if you do create your job, we don't know how we would have possibly done it without you.
Exactly. And it seems to me that's going to be the key to how we succeed, is to make it as common and ordinary every day.
And I'm the right woman. I'm the right woman for the job, because I didn't get the memo, so I can go into the political weeds, but I can be a dumbass. I can say I don't really know the fine details. What I've really enjoyed about foreclosure is I can talk about appraisal fraud. I can talk about robo-signing fraud. I can talk about the 25 different kinds of fraud that we've now identified that were part of this massive swindle.
Wow.
But I couldn't have done that 2 months ago. It's just because I got in and did that research. I couldn't speak Spanish as good as I speak now too, so I'm learning that. But it's been stunning to encounter people at the encampment who really have a deep knowledge. And you think about, a lot of people are mobilizing against the student loan bubble that's coming up.
We just hit $1 trillion. I'm sure you heard that.
So we were getting a lot of these graduates, who've already gone through the system, accumulated those loan debts, and they're using their degrees to very effective means. So you're welcome to ask questions, but I'm not sure I know the answers.
Oh, it's not so much that I'm wanting you to give me facts and stuff. Although that 25 types of loan fraud I find very striking.
I got it.
Yeah. I mean, I know the obvious ones, the MERS. That.
That's part of the securitization fraud. The beginning fraud included the appraisal fraud. And the end fraud is the foreclosure fraud, which includes the robo-signing and different types of foreclosure.
I want to explore the appraisal fraud concept. I hadn't thought of that until just when you said that. Suddenly, a little light went on.
90% of appraisers are acknowledging that they were leaned on by the banks to inflate the value of the appraisals, and that there were blacklists for appraisers who didn't play ball.
Wow.
So when the narrative...
That's like them sitting there with an air pump blowing up the bubble.
What's egregious about it is that when the banks try to tell a narrative that says homeowners bought too much house, now let's look at who was selling
too much house.
Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do with Occupy Fights Foreclosure, is change that conversation. They've got their PR budgets, they've got their marketing minions. but they don't have the 99%. And we want to change the conversation on foreclosure so that when they say things like homeowners were using their houses for ATMs, and we know that they, like the sketch showed last night, that they created these piles of turds that were worthless, sold them on the financial markets as derivatives and securitized tranches, turned around and gave value to these worthless poker chips in the biggest casino, then we know it's not the homeowners who are using their houses as ATMs, it's the banks who are stealing our houses to give equity to their money machines.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I don't. Were they talking? Yeah, they were talking about how the pile of mortgages and such was 10 times the size of the world GDP last night.
Those numbers I don't have, but it's a quadrillion. It's in the quadrillion.
I was amazed that he pulled quadrillion out last night.
Quadrillion. Yeah. Every economy in the world added all up together, it's more than that.
Yeah,
the GDP, it's astonishing. The hubris which they have launched this Ponzi scheme. It's like you ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah, and the idea of creating money out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere.
That's called counterfeiting if you're creating the money out of dollar bills, you know. But if you're doing it on a computer, it's something else entirely.
And if it's unregulated, why? Who's going to call it fraud in the first place?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I was building houses in the beginning of part of this last decade, and I remember when we started, we were building 3,000 square foot houses, and they were going for $250,000. And by the time we were done, those same houses were, 500 in plus. And plus we were building bigger houses too, because the market, I don't fully understand that, but that was the
part of the deal.
That was part of the blowing up of the balloon. I wanna circle back around. We got a little over 10 minutes. You brought up the armchair activist, which is, I'm sure it was a big deal in Occupy LA. I'm sure it is in all the Occupy camps. You've got the people who are at the camp, the people who are at the GA, working in the committees, who every day are doing the work. And then you got the crowd on Facebook and everywhere else who are chiming in and saying, "Oh, well, you can't do that. You got to do it this way. You got to do that." And so you've got the people in the trenches who indisputably of value. What about that crowd off to the side who are watching it through the internet and taking part through the internet, because now the internet's a two-way thing. You're not just watching it on TV passively. I think Facebook and all that is monumentally powerful. I mean, the idea that for the first time in probably the history of humanity, we have such a huge portion of our population in direct, able to be directly communicating with each other.
Yeah.
But and so that helped with the Arab Spring. It helps with Occupy Wall Street. But it sometimes it feels like maybe it creates problems for us too. I mean, how's that? How do you feel about that concept? Is it something that you guys have dealt with down in LA? Is it something you personally have been brushing up against?
They're really big on the engagement with the social media. I personally am, maybe because of my demographic, I'm old school. I say face to face, but please keep in mind that as an artist, I am very guilty of that hypocrisy that says, I love humanity, it's just people I can't stand. And so when you're face to face and having conflict and dissension and just abject loopiness, craziness, you would easily prefer to just send someone an email and delete, whatever.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I'll take it back to my spiritual insight that I could sit at home and engage in, which I do. I meditate, I pray, and I have periods of, like I'm talking about these long drives that I'm doing, where the gratitude really does flow out of my heart. But I could have never gotten to this level of development had I not been in the company of other people more devoted than me, more knowledgeable than me, more trained. in the types of devotion and worship that have elevated my own level. I'm talking on a spiritual level here, of worship. And the parallel absolutely applies to the political realm as well. That there is no shortcut for caucusing. It must be done. Maybe you can only go once a week, but you need to get down to a General Assembly. You need to see the people, because by nature we're suspicious. We don't trust people's motives. But when you see someone walking it like they talk it, we had early in Occupy LA a very dynamic leader named Mario Brito. And Mario was willing to work with the consensus process, but it didn't come natural to him. And so Mario took some preemptive steps that absolutely violated those principles of consensus building. And as a movement, he continues to work as an ally with Occupy LA, but because of our commitment to consensus, we now kind of have seen his true colors. And I think that he's going to be very dynamic in the union effort we've got on May 1st with the general strike, a Four Winds convergence. And out of the North Wind comes a lot of the immigrant community, and of course out of the East Wind from East Los Angeles is coming a lot of that population. And I think Mario will be right in the thick of it. So that's one example of being able to caucus and see people face to face for who they really are. And it builds trust. And so for the armchair activists out there, you owe it to yourself to get out to a General Assembly, hang out with the lunatics, hang out with the freakazoids, hang out with the weirdos, go home intact, no harm, no foul, evaluate and assess your impressions of the experience, and then think long and hard about what you can do to make it better.
Right, yeah. I mean, the reason people are tuning in through Facebook and everything is because they feel the same pressure that those of us who are showing up at the General Assemblies are feeling. So.
Yeah, but you know what? If it's not the ultimate oxymoron, a virtual revolution, I don't want my revolution to be virtual.
I agree.
When it comes, I want it to be real.
Yes, yes. Where are you going to be on May 1st?
I'm going to be definitely at MacArthur Park. That's part of the West Winds convergence. But I'm trying to sway my affinity group to go by Blanca's house, do a little ruckus noise making there just to let her husband Gerardo and her family know that they are not forgotten. Move into Chinatown. We're fighting against a Walmart effort there. And then everything kind of converges in the downtown area, which is where I live, so it's kind of my neighborhood anyway.
Right. So you got a long drive ahead of you this weekend. Got to get back to LA.
Well, Seattle is on the 29th. That's Sunday, I think.
Yeah.
And then I fly back home Monday, the 30th.
Oh, okay.
So I have a day off.
All right.
Before a day without the 99%.
A day without, a day with. Day without
a day
the
without
1%.
the, well, we say a day without the 99% contributing to an economic model that is quite unsustainable and obsolete. So
I was looking at
the other way.
You will be with the 99%.
I will be with the 99%. Very likely the 1% will be with us because that's all they do with their time anyways is play because they let their money do their work for them. So, but we'll be out.
Living the 1% lifestyle, except that 1% don't get the severe attention that you guys might be getting that day.
Severe. Let's hope.
Yeah. Hoping for the severe attention, or hoping that. I mean, when I'm talking severe, I'm just wondering how many billy clubs are going to be swung on May 1st.
You know, revolution is a very playful and a very peaceful thing. We are nonviolent. We are peaceful. So our entire concept of May Day is a celebration. It's not in any way intimidation. It's not in any way threatening. In the same way that vision I had from the Million Mexican March. They just showed up.
Right.
They didn't have to do nothing.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was wondering is if that is, I mean, the whole point of May 1st, I think, is the day, if you are an armchair activist, if you are a Facebook activist, that's the day to get out there and be on the streets, because that's the day we need the numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so unfortunately, though, that's also the day that if you're a cop, if you're a Homeland Security agent, you know, that's the day for you to be out on the streets too, and responding in kind. Yeah.
I'm sure creativity will solve all of those conundrums.
I hope
We
so.
have enough creativity to solve all these problems.
Yeah, and I don't want to be a doomsayer. I don't want to make it sound like I think that it's us versus them, all that, because eventually we have to embrace everybody, because there's very few cops and Homeland Security agents who are earning more than $380,000 a year.
We've said it before, we'll say it again, they're part of the 99%.
That's right, yeah. And the people who show up to foreclose on houses and such, those people, I mean, we're all extensions eventually of somebody at the top, but we can sever that extension, that connection, I guess. Yeah. Well, we got a couple minutes left. Anything that's just bubbling up to the top of your brain that you want to share?
Yeah, I've got a couple of little ditties.
Oh yeah? Okay.
Because I say there will be times when you don't have access to a guitar, like you're handcuffed sitting for 7 hours in the back of a bus waiting for the booking to commence. And then also, as I was learning about the foreclosure issue, and I turned 50 around the same time. That Paul Simon song inspired this. I say, the problem is all inside your head, she said to me. The answer's rather easy if you take it logically. I'd like to help you in your struggle to be free. There must be 50 ways to loathe your lender. 50 ways to loathe your lender. Call it fraud, Rod. Call it a scam, Sam. You know it's swindle, Wendell. Now you listen to me. You threw us under the bus, Gus. We're broke and disgusted. You try offering cash for Keesley? Oh no, we're going to set ourselves free.
I just heard that the one line you trotted out, the 50 ways to loathe your lender. Thank you. I'm glad I
You
heard
like
the
that?
whole thing. Yeah. You didn't share that with us last night, the
50
whole
ways to loathe your lender.
thing. Yeah. Well, we only have a half a minute left. I don't know. You were talking about the orange braid?
Yeah, if you'll help me, try this.
Okay.
We occupy, we occupy, we occupy, we occupy, we occupy, we occupy, we occupy. Again. We occupy, we occupy, we occupy, we occupy, we occupy, we occupy, we occupy. Keep it going. We are the 99%, 99%, 99%. We are the 99%, 99%, 99%. We are the 99%, 99%. Okay, here, I'll do my solo. We do not consent to tyrants or violence with silence. We withhold compliance when we occupy.
Thank you. All right. And that has been another episode of Occupy TV with Michelle Schock today. Tune in again next time. Thank you so much.
There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children.